Ambassador Valix's tentacles trembled as he manipulated the holographic display, causing ripples in his ceremonial nectar cup. The liquid, worth more than most planetary economies, sloshed dangerously close to the rim. His assistant, a crystalline being named Shimmer, moved to steady the cup but stopped short when Valix's scales shifted to a deep purple of discovery. They did what? The ambassador's translator struggled to convey the mixture of disbelief and intrigue in his harmonic voice. Confirm these readings again. The data stream showed what should have been impossible. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel without using the fundamental forces of telepathic engineering. It was like discovering someone had built a quantum computer using nothing but sticks and stones. Meanwhile, 4.3 light-years away in the basement of NASA's Deep Space Division, Dr. Emily Anderson was having her own moment of disbelief. The coffee cup in her hand had gone cold hours ago, forgotten as she stared at the anomalous readings on her screen. "Hey, Ryan," she called to her assistant, who was dozing on the office couch. "Remember that weird signal pattern we picked up last month? The one everyone said was just background radiation." Ryan Matthews jolted awake, nearly knocking over a stack of research papers. "The one that looked like it was dancing." "Yeah, what about it?" Emily pulled up a new window on her holoscreen, the blue light illuminating her face in the dimly lit office. "It's not dancing. It's watching." She spun the display toward him, showing a complex pattern of energy signatures that formed a perfect observation grid around Earth's solar system. "Holy!" Ryan's voice trailed off as the implications hit him. "We're not alone," Emily finished his thought. "And they think they're being subtle about it." Over the next 72 hours, Emily assembled a team of Earth's best and brightest, all while keeping their discovery off official channels. Dr. Marcus Thompson, the leading expert in signal processing, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes from Military Intelligence, Professor James Wilson, whose theories about alien psychology had been laughed at for years. They gathered in a converted storage room, now dubbed the Lighthouse by the team. The walls were covered in data streams, signal analyses, and probability maps. "Look at the precision," Marcus said, pointing to a particular energy signature. "These aren't random probes. This is a standard information gathering operation. They have a protocol." Sarah nodded, her military training kicking in. "And every protocol has its weaknesses. They're using some kind of advanced cloaking technology, but they're still making basic tactical assumptions." "Like what?" Emily leaned forward, intrigued. "They assume we can't see them." Sarah smiled. "Which means everything they're doing is based on that assumption. They're not encrypting their communications nearly as well as they could be." Professor Wilson, who had been quietly making notes, finally spoke up. "The real question isn't whether we can see them. It's why they're being so formal about this. These patterns," he gestured to the data streams, "they're almost ceremonial, like a dance." Emily's eyes widened as the pieces clicked together. "They're not just studying us. They're preparing for something." The team worked through the night, decoding more of the alien transmissions. What they found was both fascinating and amusing. The observers were part of something called the Galactic Council, and they were following a procedure that was older than human civilization. "Look at this," Ryan called out, breaking the focused silence. I think they're planning a party." Emily looked over his shoulder at the decoded transmission. It was true. The Galactic Council was planning the most elaborate first contact ceremony in their history, complete with what appeared to be the equivalent of a stellar fireworks display. "Should we tell someone?" Ryan asked, looking uncertain. Emily leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. "Oh, we'll tell them. But first, let's learn everything we can about our new friends. Something tells me the council isn't used to their surprises being spoiled." As dawn broke over the NASA complex, The small team had already given Earth an advantage no other species had ever had: advance notice of their own first contact. The question now was how to use it. Admiral Jessica Hayes stood at the Lunar Command Center's main viewport, her arms crossed as she watched the Council's diplomatic fleet emerge from hyperspace. The ships appeared one by one, each breaking into normal space, in a display of light that put the Aurora Borealis to shame. "Show-offs," she muttered, though she couldn't quite hide her smile. The main display showed 12 crystalline vessels, each one larger than Manhattan, arranging themselves in what the intelligence team had identified as the Crown of Welcome formation. The ship's hull materials shifted colors in a synchronized dance, creating patterns that seemed to bend space itself. "Admiral," her communications officer, Lieutenant Mark Davidson, called out. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, and I mean all of them. Radio, quantum, even some we didn't know existed." Jessica nodded. Right on schedule. Dr. Anderson's team had predicted this exactly. The Council believed in making an impression. "Put it through to the main screen, Lieutenant. Let's see what our new friends have prepared." The message began playing, a masterpiece of diplomatic choreography that had probably been rehearsed for months. The Council had somehow created a perfect holographic display visible to everyone on Earth's day side, showing representatives of all 47 member species in their full ceremonial regalia. In the United Nations emergency session, Chief Diplomat Michael Roberts adjusted his tie one last time. The Council's message was now in its 4th hour, having gone through welcome speeches in every major language on Earth, including 3 that had been dead for centuries. "Are we really going through with this?" the French representative whispered to him. Michael allowed himself a small smile. 6 months ago, Dr. Anderson's team gave us an incredible gift: time to prepare. We've run the simulations, studied their patterns, and made our choice. The Council expects us to be overwhelmed, grateful, and compliant. He checked his watch. Instead, they're about to learn something about human nature. Back on the moon, Admiral Hayes watched as the Council's message reached its crescendo. The final speaker, Ambassador Valix himself, was making what he probably thought was an irresistible offer. "And so, noble species of Earth," the translation echoed through the command center, "we welcome you to join the greatest civilization in known space. Your unique achievements have earned you this honor. Together, we shall guide your development, share our knowledge, and welcome you into the light of true progress." Jessica checked the time. Cue Mr. Roberts in 10, 9. On every screen across Earth, and in the Council's fleet, the image changed. Michael Roberts stood at the UN podium, the flags of all nations behind him. He looked exactly as human leadership should look, according to the Council's research: dignified, grateful, and humble. What came next was none of those things. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," Michael began, his voice clear and strong. "On behalf of the United Earth Government, we thank you for your generous offer." He paused, creating what the speechwriters had called the moment of false hope. "However, we must respectfully decline." In the Lunar Command Center, Jessica could have sworn she heard jaws dropping across space. The Council's perfect formation actually wobbled. Furthermore, Michael continued, either oblivious to or enjoying the shock he'd just caused, "Earth would like to propose an alternative arrangement, one that we believe will benefit both our civilizations while maintaining our independence." Ambassador Velix's image appeared on the emergency channel, his scales now a chaotic mix of colors that the xenobiologists would later identify as total bafflement. This is unprecedented," Velix's translator struggled to convey his harmonic tones. "No species has ever." "Yes," Michael agreed pleasantly. "We get that a lot. Now, about our counterproposal." In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Hayes finally allowed herself a full smile. Send Dr. Anderson a message, she told Lieutenant Davidson. Tell her she was right. They never saw it coming. The greatest diplomatic show in the galaxy had just been upstaged by a simple word that the Council had never heard in response to their offer. No. Council researcher Zix-427 slumped in his observation pod, his crystalline form dulled from exhaustion. The holoscreen before him played yet another human entertainment product, something called Independence Day. For the 7th time. His research notes had devolved from careful analysis to increasingly desperate questions. Why do they keep fighting the obviously superior forces? He muttered to himself, adding another note to his already overflowing database. And why do they keep making stories about it? His research partner, Velix, floated nearby, her gaseous form swirling in obvious distress. I just finished analyzing their Star Trek series. Do you know they have over 300 years of entertainment media about humans outsmarting more advanced species? It's like they've been rehearsing for this moment. Meanwhile, in the newly established CIA Xenopolitical Division, Director James Cooper was having the time of his life. His team had spent the last 6 months carefully curating what the Council's researchers would find in their cultural analysis. How's Project Hollywood going? He asked his deputy director, Michelle Torres, as she entered his office with the latest reports. She grinned, setting down a tablet filled with intercepted Council communications. They just discovered Planet of the Apes. I think we broke another research team. They're absolutely convinced that humans have some sort of species-wide resistance to authority programmed into their DNA. James leaned back in his chair, satisfaction written across his face. And the historical package we prepared, being processed by their anthropologists right now. We made sure to highlight every major revolution, every successful resistance movement, and every instance of smaller nations maintaining independence against larger powers. Michelle's eyes sparkled with mischief. We may have slightly emphasized certain themes. Back in the Council's research division, Zix-427 had called an emergency meeting of the Xenocultural Analysis team. The room's holographic displays were filled with images from Earth's history, the American Revolution, the fall of empires, the rise of democracy, and countless stories of underdogs prevailing against overwhelming odds. It's not just their entertainment media, he explained to the assembled researchers, his crystal form flickering with agitation. It's everything. Their music, their literature, their history. It all tells the same story. Humans don't want to be uplifted. They want to climb up themselves. A senior researcher, one of the few who had studied pre-contact species before, raised an appendage. Perhaps we're looking at this wrong. Has anyone analyzed their scientific development pattern? Velix swirled forward, projecting a timeline. That's the most baffling part. Look at their technology progression. Every time they hit a barrier, instead of doing the sensible thing and waiting for help or looking for shortcuts, they just keep trying different approaches until something works. They turn down our faster-than-light drive designs. Another researcher added, but look at what we just intercepted from their research facilities. The display showed human scientists working on their own FTL prototype. It was inefficient, inelegant, and by Council standards, should not have worked at all. Yet the test results were undeniable. In his office, Director Cooper reviewed the latest intelligence. The Council's research teams were running themselves ragged trying to understand human psychology, while missing the most important point. Humanity had already decided its path long before first contact. He picked up his secure phone and dialed Dr. Anderson's number. Emily, they're reading the history package now. How long until they figure out what we're really planning? Her response made him smile. They won't. They're too busy trying to understand why we said no to see what we're saying yes to. By the time they figure it out, everything will be in place. As night fell over the CIA headquarters, the Council's researchers continued their frantic analysis, still unable to grasp a simple truth. You can't understand humans by studying them like specimens. You had to understand why they looked at the stars and saw not a guide to follow, but a challenge to overcome. Special Trade Envoy Rachel Martinez stood before the mirror in the Council's temporary Earth embassy, adjusting her suit one final time. The building itself was a marvel of alien architecture, its walls shifting like liquid crystal, yet she'd insisted on meeting in the simple conference room designed to human specifications. "The document is ready, Ma'am," her assistant, Tom Bradley, said from the doorway. He held a single tablet containing what would soon become the most studied diplomatic proposal in galactic history. Rachel nodded, taking one last deep breath. "How's our time?" "Right on schedule. The Council's Economic Advisory Board is already in the conference room. They'd brought 12 experts this time." "Only 12. She smiled. "They're getting desperate." The conference room was a study in contrasts. On one side sat the Council's delegation, a mix of species, each more exotic than the last, their advanced technology humming softly in the background. On the other side, just Rachel and Tom, with a single tablet between them. "Honorable representatives," Rachel began, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you for meeting with us today. I understand our previous response to your generous offer was unexpected." A tall, silvery being that served as the Council's chief economic officer made a sound that the translator rendered as a polite chuckle. "Unexpected is an understatement, Envoy Martinez. In 40,000 years, no species has ever declined membership. We're curious about this counter-proposal of yours." Rachel tapped her tablet, sending the document to their devices. "It's quite simple, really. Instead of joining the Council as a member state, Earth proposes to establish itself as an independent trading hub and diplomatic neutral zone between Council space and the unexplored regions." The room went silent as the aliens began reading. Rachel had seen many strange things since first contact, but watching a gaseous being do a double take was a new one. "This is..." The chief economic officer's translator crackled with static as it struggled to convey his tone. "This is either brilliant or madness. You're proposing to use our own trade laws to create a position that has never existed before." Tom stepped forward, bringing up a holographic display of the galaxy. "As you can see, Earth's position makes it ideal for this role. We're situated at the perfect junction between established Council space and the unexplored frontier. By remaining independent, we can serve as a neutral ground for both Council and non-Council species." Another Council member, a crystalline entity, chimed in. "But the infrastructure required, the security implications, all addressed in Appendix C," Rachel cut in smoothly. "We've already begun developing the necessary facilities. And as for security," she smiled, "well, humanity has quite a bit of experience in protecting trade routes." The Council representatives huddled together, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of whispers, clicks, and light pulses. Rachel waited patiently, knowing what they would find as they dug deeper into the proposal. Finally, the chief economic officer spoke again. "You've included provisions for technology exchange, but not in the traditional way. You're offering to be what's the term? A test market." "Exactly," Rachel confirmed. "Earth will serve as a proving ground for new technologies, both Council and non-Council. Our adaptability and innovation can help bridge the gap between different technical approaches." Back in the monitoring room, Dr. Emily Anderson watched the meeting with Director Cooper. "They still don't get it, do they?" she asked. Cooper shook his head, smiling. "Nope. They think we're just being clever with trade laws. They haven't realized that we're actually building something much bigger. A new kind of galactic community," Emily finished. "One where cooperation doesn't require submission. In the conference room, the council representatives were running their fourth analysis of the proposal's economic implications. They were so focused on the numbers that they missed the real revolution hidden in the diplomatic language. Humanity wasn't just securing its independence, it was creating a template for a different kind of future. Ambassador Thomas Wells had seen his share of political chaos during his years at the United Nations, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of the council chambers descending into complete disorder. The massive amphitheater, designed to project an image of eternal harmony, now resembled a stellar-scale food fight without the food. From his observer's seat, he watched as the crystalline representative of the Zix collective literally shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. Their species equivalent of a temper tantrum. Fascinating display, noted his assistant, Jennifer Parker, who was furiously taking notes on her tablet. Should we be concerned that the methane-breathing delegates have started releasing stress gases? Thomas checked the environmental readings on his suite's control panel. The chamber's atmospheric processors can handle it. Keep recording. Dr. Anderson's team will want every detail of this. The council's unity, unbroken for 10,000 years, was cracking like ice in spring. The younger species, led by the recently uplifted Novarians, were openly questioning why they had so eagerly accepted membership centuries ago. The elder races, traditional powers like the Exotheri, were demanding immediate sanctions against Earth. "This is unprecedented," thundered the Exotheri speaker, his crystalline voice matrix crackling with emotion. "First, they reject our generous offer, and now their very defiance inspires disorder among our own members." The Novarian representative, a bioluminescent being named Pulse, flashed in what Thomas had learned was their version of sarcastic laughter. Perhaps if the humans can achieve faster-than-light travel without using standard methods, they have other ideas worth considering. From his private chamber adjacent to the main hall, Grand Speaker Valix watched the proceedings with growing horror. His scales had turned a deep shade of distress purple that hadn't been seen in the council chambers since the last Galactic War. "Speaker Wells," he called out, using the private channel to Thomas's position. "How did your species know this would happen?" Thomas allowed himself a small smile. "With all due respect, Speaker Valix, we didn't know. We just recognized the pattern. Every empire, every federation, every union in human history has faced this moment. When its members begin to question why they gave up their autonomy for security." In the main chamber, the debate had shifted from Earth's proposal to the nature of the Council itself. The quantum-based intelligences of the Silicon Rim were running probability matrices that showed increased innovation potential in less regulated systems. The organic collectives of the Spiral Arm were sharing data about cultural stagnation in fully integrated member states. Jennifer leaned over to Thomas, keeping her voice low. Director Cooper's latest update just came through. 17 member species have already sent back-channel requests for private meetings with Earth's representatives. "Tell him to start scheduling them," Thomas replied, his eyes still on the chaos below. "And remind the diplomatic corps, we're not here to break the council. We're here to help it evolve." The chamber's artificial day cycle was beginning to dim when Grand Speaker Valix finally called for order. His voice, amplified by ancient technologies, cut through the discord like a blade through silk. "We will recess for 3 standard cycles," he announced. "During this time, all members are encouraged to study Earth's proposal in detail. We must consider not just their offer, but its implications for our future." As the various representatives filed out through their respective environmental chambers, Thomas received another message from Earth. This one was from Dr. Emily Anderson herself. "Phase 1 complete. The cracks are showing. Proceed with Phase 2. Thomas looked out over the empty council chamber, where maintenance drones were already repairing the damage from today's heated debates. He thought about the 10,000 years of history in this room, and how it had taken humanity less than a month to transform it from a symbol of unity into a forum for real debate. "Confirmed," he replied. "They're ready for what comes next." In the gathering darkness of the chamber, the ghost of an old human saying seemed to echo. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it properly. Lieutenant Kate Wilson never expected her jury-rigged engine modification to cause a galactic sensation. She stood in her workshop at the Lunar Research Facility, surrounded by what most council engineers would consider junk, modified coffee makers, repurposed washing machine parts, and what used to be a food processor. "You did what to the quantum field generator?" Dr. Marcus Thompson asked, staring at the contraption with a mixture of horror and admiration. Kate wiped some grease off her hands and grinned. "Well, I figured if the standard design creates a bubble using rotating quantum fields, why not use the spin cycle mechanism from an old washing machine? The principle is the same, just scaled up and modified for space-time instead of clothes." And the coffee maker. Perfect heat distribution system. These things are built to maintain exact temperatures, exactly what we need for plasma control. What neither of them knew was that their conversation was being recorded by 3 different council species spy devices. Within hours, Kate's primitive solution had become the most sought-after technical document in 5 star systems. In the Novarian Science Academy, Professor Pulse was having an existential crisis. But it shouldn't work. The bioluminescent being flashed in patterns of deep confusion. They're using consumer appliances to modify quantum field dynamics. His research partner, a silicon-based entity named Logic Prime, had already started modeling the principles. Yet it does work, and more efficiently than our standard designs. The humans are not bound by our assumptions about what is possible. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in research centers and engineering labs. Council species had spent millennia perfecting their telepathic engineering, using their various forms of mental powers to shape technology at the quantum level. The idea that someone could achieve similar results with modified household appliances was revolutionary. Back on Earth, Director Cooper sat in a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, reviewing the latest intelligence. "They're going crazy over Lieutenant Wilson's engine modifications," he reported, unable to hide his amusement. "But that's not the best part. Show them the education reports, Dr. Anderson." Emily brought up a holographic display showing application statistics. "We're getting flooded with requests from council worlds. Their best and brightest want to study at Earth universities. Not just engineering. Everything from art to philosophy." General Sarah Mitchell leaned forward, her eyes scanning the data. "They want to learn how we think." "Exactly," Emily nodded. "They've realized that our primitive approach has advantages. We don't just solve problems differently. We see them differently." In a secret research facility on the council core world of Zix Prime, a team of scientists gathered around a smuggled Earth device, a simple toaster. They had been studying it for weeks, fascinated by its elegant simplicity. No telepathic interface, one researcher noted. No quantum manipulation, just physics and engineering. And yet, another added, when we apply these principles to our own technology. Their latest project sat on the table, a hybrid drive system that combined council telepathic engineering with human-style mechanical innovation. It was ugly, inelegant, and worked better than anything they'd created in the last century. Lieutenant Wilson, unaware of her growing fame, was already working on her next project. She held up a modified video game controller, connected to a mass of wires and parts that might once have been a microwave. "See, I was thinking," she explained to Dr. Thompson. "If we can use this for engine control, why not for navigation? The human brain is already good at processing 3-dimensional movement through video games." As she spoke, 3 more species added her name to their must-recruit lists, and 6 different patent offices began reviewing their procedures for cross-species innovation protection. The galaxy was learning a lesson that Earth had known for millennia. Sometimes the best solutions aren't the most elegant ones. Sometimes you just need a coffee maker, a washing machine, and the audacity to try something new. Secretary of Commerce Andrew Parker sat in his office, watching the holographic newsfeed as the Existhery ambassador announced the trade embargo against Earth. The ancient species representative was practically glowing with smug satisfaction, his crystalline form refracting light in what their cultural experts had identified as a victory pattern. "And now we wait," Andrew said to his deputy, Lisa Chen. "How long do you think it'll take them to notice?" Lisa checked her tablet. "The Novarians have already figured it out. Their trade minister just sent an emergency message through back channels. Should I put it on screen?" The message was simple. "You planned for this, didn't you?" Andrew's response was even simpler. "Of course we did." In the following hours, the Council's economic analysts began to uncover what humanity had been quietly building over the past 6 months. Dr. Emily Anderson's team hadn't just been studying the Council's observation patterns. They'd been mapping the entire galactic economic network. In the Council's emergency economic session, the reality began to sink in. The junior analyst, his gaseous form swirling with agitation, presented the findings. "They've established trade routes through non-council space," he reported. "Not just a few, hundreds of them. They've been making deals with independent worlds, frontier colonies, even the quantum nomads." The chief economic officer's crystalline form dulled with horror. "How many?" "At last count, they have trade agreements with 317 non-council entities, and that's just what we know about." Meanwhile, in a secret meeting room deep within the Pentagon, General Mitchell was briefing the Joint Chiefs on Operation Shadow Market. The walls were covered with maps showing the complex web of trade routes and relationships Earth had established. While the Council was busy trying to understand why we said no, she explained, "We were building this. Every alternative supply source, every backup trade route, every possible workaround for Council resources, all in place before they ever thought of an embargo." One of the admirals whistled low. "They really never saw it coming." "They still don't see it," Director Cooper added, entering the room. "The embargo's been in effect for 6 hours now. Our trading volume has actually increased by 12%. On the Council's capital world, the first corporate riots were beginning. 3 major companies had seen their stock values plummet as news spread of Earth's alternative trade network. The Existhery trade guilds, who had pushed hardest for the embargo, were facing shareholder revolts. "How?" the guild master demanded, his crystal form cracking with stress. "How did they replace our supply chain so quickly?" The answer came from an unexpected source, a young human intern at the Council's trade office who had been invited to speak to the emergency session. "You're looking at it wrong," she explained, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the panic around her. "You think we replaced your supply chains? We didn't. We built parallel ones. On Earth, we call it competition. It's the foundation of our economic system." In his office, Secretary Parker received the news he'd been waiting for. The Council's hardline faction was crumbling. The embargo had lasted exactly 17 hours before the first major corporation demanded its repeal. "Should we accept their surrender?" Lisa asked, already drafting the response. Andrew shook his head. "No need. Let them save face by calling it a temporary suspension for further economic analysis. Meanwhile, send out the Phase 2 trade proposals to our new partners, the non-council worlds. And the council worlds that were smart enough to stay out of this fight," he added. "It's time to show the galaxy what real free trade looks like." As night fell over Washington, the last pieces of humanity's economic chess game were falling into place. They hadn't just survived the Council's embargo. They'd used it to demonstrate a fundamental truth. In a galaxy full of ancient powers, sometimes the best strategy was to think like a startup. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Galactic Council was meeting outside their traditional chambers. The United Nations Assembly Hall in New York had been modified to accommodate representatives of every known spacefaring species, creating a stunning display of diversity that stretched the building's environmental systems to their limits. UN Secretary-General Alexandra Mitchell stood at the podium, her presence a testament to how far things had come. Behind her, Earth's skyline sparkled with both human architecture and alien additions, a visual representation of the new order they were about to formalize. Distinguished representatives of the galaxy, she began, her voice clear and strong. We gather here not to end something, but to begin something new. In the diplomatic section, Ambassador Thomas Wells sat between Dr. Emily Anderson and Director Cooper, all three looking more relaxed than they had in months. The hard work was done. Now it was time to make it official. When humanity first said no to council membership, Alexandra continued, many assumed we were choosing isolation over integration. Today proves otherwise. We chose a different path, not to stand apart, but to stand together in a new way. The Council's new charter appeared on the holographic displays throughout the hall. It was a document that had gone through thousands of revisions, incorporating ideas from both Council and non-Council worlds. At its heart was what the media had started calling the human model, a system of graduated relationships that allowed for everything from full integration to limited partnership. Grand Speaker Valix, his scales now a peaceful blue, rose to address the assembly. For too long, we offered the galaxy a single choice: join us completely or remain apart. The humans showed us there were other options. More importantly, they showed us why those options were necessary. In the scientific section, Lieutenant Kate Wilson tried not to fidget in her formal uniform. Around her sat some of the galaxy's greatest minds, including several who had initially scoffed at her primitive innovations. Now they were her research partners on projects that combined the best of both human and council technology. The new charter, Alexandra explained, recognizes that diversity isn't just about different species or technologies. It's about different approaches, different paths, different ways of solving the same problems. Unity doesn't require uniformity. The vote, when it came, was unprecedented in council history. For the first time, non-member worlds participated alongside full members. The resolution passed with an overwhelming majority, formally establishing the new framework for galactic relations. In the back of the hall, Rachel Martinez watched with Secretary Parker as their economic predictions played out in real time. Markets across known space were responding to the news, with new investment opportunities opening up as different worlds chose their level of integration. You know what the best part is, Rachel whispered to Parker. They think this was our plan all along. Parker smiled. Wasn't it? No, she replied. Our plan was just to stay independent. Everything else was just humanity being human, seeing a problem and fixing it, even if the problem was 10,000 years old. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Anderson found herself standing next to Professor Pulse from the Novarian Science Academy. The bioluminescent being flickered in what she'd learned was their version of thoughtful contemplation. You never wanted to break the council, Pulse observed. You wanted to fix it. Emily nodded. Sometimes the best way to preserve something is to let it evolve. We humans have a lot of experience with that. The reception that followed was unlike anything either human or council history had seen before. Species that had never been in the same room mixed and mingled, sharing ideas and making plans. The rigid hierarchies of the past were gone, replaced by a network of relationships as complex and beautiful as the galaxy itself. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution wasn't saying no to the council. It was showing the galaxy that there were always more options than simply yes or no. The future wasn't a single path, but a network of possibilities, each one valid, each one valuable in its own way. And that, perhaps, was the most human idea of all.